Hi, I'm Andrew November, attorney at Liner Legal.
Hi, I'm Maria O'Neill Ruddock. I'm the director of the Community Center for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing at the Cleveland Hearing and Speech Center.
Today we're here to produce a video to discuss issues that our deaf and hard of hearing clients have with getting effective communication, specifically having interpreters provided so they're able to communicate with various people in the world, such as medical providers or employers. I thought it would be very helpful to have Maria come in and share her experience advocating for deaf individuals. Maria?
Thanks, Andrew, for having me today. It's actually become quite a critical problem in the Cleveland area. Just making sure that individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing have access to effective communication has been quite a challenge. Despite the fact that our ADA law requires that individuals be provided with accommodations vis-a-vis a sign language interpreter or other kinds of accommodations, there are still many agencies, organizations, and companies that are not aware of their responsibilities to provide access to individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing.
So, in what areas are you seeing the problems?
We're seeing the problems pretty much across the board. A lot in the medical profession where individuals may be provided with one kind of communication. Perhaps it might be through video remote interpreting as opposed to live interpreting, and perhaps we can talk about that in a little bit, where that might not be an effective means for them to get equal access to their medical
Sure.
information. So that's one area that we're seeing. While the medical provider sees it as a viable option, it may not be the best option for the patient.
And why is that? I've noticed with a lot of the clients that come into our office, it seems like the medical providers around you, that just is the default. That's the default option to give video remote interpreting.
Well, I think part of that is I believe the medical providers believe they're satisfying the requirement of ADA by providing a remote service. What is not effective is for individuals who perhaps have limited English proficiency or have minimal sign ability, where a video remote interpreter is not someone in the local area who knows the vernacular of the signs that are used here in the Cleveland area. In addition, the interpreter is not necessarily, when they're remote, able to break down the information for an individual who might have difficulties understanding the complexities of their medical issues. And that remote interpreter is not able to actually provide that kind of breakdown for that individual. In addition, for people that have limited vision, that might have, or that are in a reclined position, or lying on a gurney, or for example, where it's very difficult to get that remote system to be able to both see as well as hear the environment. So it's not always effective for every client. Some clients appreciate it, but most of the clients that we see in our community center have a very difficult time with the video remote systems.
And what do you think their biggest complaint is? Is it that because of the condition that they're there for, like you said, if they're lying on their back, or if they're on a gurney, something like that, or is it just they're not able to effectively communicate? Like, what are you hearing? Is there a theme in the community?
Yeah, so it's effective communication. It's not understanding the interpreter that is in a remote location, because again, that interpreter could be an interpreter from Milwaukee. It could be a person in New York City. And again, we have a very different vernacular here in the Cleveland area. We have local signs, and that person that is remote may not be the best match for a person who is deaf here in the Cleveland metropolitan area, or even in some of the suburbs as well. I think the other complaint that we are hearing is that deaf individuals find that those that are using the remote system are not actually well trained to use the system, or it's not working effectively. It pixelates. It's not clear. If the interpreter is, it has to be changed out. If they need another interpreter, I think it interrupts the appointment. I think it interrupts the flow of the appointment. And it's not as personal as an individual would like. I mean, you want that interpreter to match very well with the kinds of communication that they're using, as well as and again, to be a skilled person in that area. So, for example, many of our live interpreters that are sent out to medical appointments are individuals that have a lot of experience in the medical profession. So they know the kinds of vocabulary to use. They know the kinds of signs that match that individual's needs, so that they have a much more effective appointment with that medical provider. The feedback also from the medical providers is just that as well, is that for those doctors that are using live interpreters, they actually prefer them because they are able to have to get an understanding of of the person's difficulties in a much more clear, concise manner. And again, when you're talking about medical issues, whether it's diagnoses or other things, I think that it's essential that communication is exact.
Yeah, so you're telling me they're actually switching out interpreters in the middle of appointments?
They sometimes do, not always, but sometimes. It depends upon how long the medical appointment lasts.
Yeah. That seems like that could be a huge problem. I mean, so much of the investigation when you arrive at the emergency department or just a normal appointment is going over what they call the history of the present illness. You know, there's so many facts that are important, and I think an interpreter would have to remember that because, you know, questions are going to repeat themselves. I don't understand how someone could jump into a conversation and
in the middle, and it would be like switching doctors in the middle of the appointment.
You almost would have to start over.
Almost. And the other thing that VRI is also being used, VRI meaning video remote interpreting, is also being used in mental health appointments, which is, in my estimation, is actually a very difficult and is one of the things that is critical in mental health, is being able to get that accurate diagnosis of an individual's issues. And using someone that is remote in that situation has been very problematic.
I heard a theme in the community myself since we've been doing deaf discrimination work here about the equipment freezing. I hear that word all the time. I see the sign that it's freezing.
Right.
Is that really a big problem?
We do hear about that pretty consistently as well, that it's not always clear. And I think that whether it's freezes or pixelates, again, it interrupts that flow of communication where you wouldn't have that with a live person.
So what do you suggest to a deaf or a hard of hearing person to do when they get to the hospital? Say it wasn't something expected. Correct. They didn't have time to plan it out. Like what should they do? Well,
it's actually a very good point, Andrew, because again, when it's an emergency situation and you are going to an emergency room at a local hospital, there won't be a live interpreter available. And so VRI is a good substitute until such time that a live interpreter
So it should be a start, something.
It absolutely can be. Now, one of the things that we recommend to patients is if they are not able to understand a VRI interpreter, that they need to let that be known, that they need to let the nurse or the doctor know they're not able to understand the interpreter and that they need a live interpreter. So we suggest to our clients that they make that request, that it's there. If they are having difficulty with the video remote system, that they need to be able to let that be known. Similarly, when they make appointments that are not emergency appointments, when they're making an appointment with their regular physician, that they should be requesting live if that is what meets their needs most effectively.
Okay. Now, as a lawyer, what I would think is they probably have to email this. You kind of want documentation. Is that what you're advising your clients?
So we do advise our clients to keep records. So in some situations, our clients don't have access to email. And in those situations, we actually request of them to keep records of what they have requested. and in some situations, even coming to our office if we can assist them in some way. But we definitely recommend that they keep documentation of what they've requested. Most of our clients will keep just a little notebook, whether it's a notebook of what they've requested, when they requested, kind of when they requested and who they requested with.
Sure.
At least we have that information to be able to go back to a provider and say, you know, Mr. X spoke with so-and-so and requested a live interpreter, and yet when they showed up for their appointment, a live interpreter was not provided.
Do you see a trend that video remote interpreting is increasing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we are seeing a trend. We're seeing a trend in areas where we don't want to see trends.
What's that?
And that's mental health,
Mental
actually.
health.
And that I feel actually, I would almost want to label it dangerous, because it's very difficult to make diagnoses as well as to be able to really have an effective session with a client when you're not utilizing the same interpreter. So best practice in the mental health field is to use the same interpreter that is actually partnering with that psychologist, clinical social worker, psychiatrist, so that there is some knowledge of not only of the mental health field, which is essential, but also of that client's interactions and how the interaction should be. The role of the interpreter really is to be that conduit of information, and in mental health in particular, the relationship needs to be with the doctor. That the relationship in mental health is the most critical factor, and so that interpreter partnering with the doctor becomes invisible if it's actually being done effectively.
So one thing I'm going to take this conversation a few steps back is I've heard from people calling me that hospitals, well, maybe not hospitals, maybe it's your small doctor, your family practitioner will say, oh, we don't have to give an interpreter. We don't have enough employees. The law doesn't require. I've always said that the ADA, the American with Disabilities Act, will never affect systemic change, meaning that the terrible burden on deaf people is that they have to constantly have confrontations to prove their rights, to show their rights. You know, for example, just last night, my wife Carrie, who's deaf, was booking an airline ticket. And the airline, she called via relay, which is using type-to-speech, asked her to explain how deaf she is. When she told them that she was deaf, they wanted essentially a diagnosis, you know, and that just seemed like it was a very poorly trained individual. So I guess what I'm getting at is, what do you do when you find someone that is just clearly not aware of what the Americans with Disabilities Act provides? What do we do in that case?
Right. Well, I think our job in this field is to educate. I think it is to raise awareness. I think it is to have conversations like this that people are able to access. I think it's education, 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 because there are many, even though we're over 25 years of the ADA being in effect, we're still seeing a lot of individuals who really aren't aware. And for those that aren't, I think it's our job to educate. And I think once you are aware, then it's your job to educate as well. So what I say, not only to my staff, but to individuals who we train, so we're here to be advocates. Once you hear this information, it's your job to be an advocate. So I think it's reaching more people. I think it's also important for organizations to take a step back and put themselves in the place of a deaf person for two reasons. One is to recognize, like, what would it be like for me if I wanted that access to information at the same level. I would put it, if I had a child who was going through a critical incident in hospital, wouldn't I want my child to have the exact same information as a hearing child would have going into an operation? Wouldn't I want them prepared in the exact same way? Just having minimal communication with someone, perhaps via writing, or with some just gestural language, is that really a way of, that really providing equal information?
And that's the key, it's equal access.
Correct.
Yeah, I get very troubled like that. I have a couple clients currently who are deaf that have brought me just piles of handwritten notes, and they're going on every direction of the paper. I mean, you're looking at them upside down.
Right.
You can't tell the timeline of when the notes are created.
Right.
I mean, it's shocking that people will try to communicate that way with our.
Yeah, and to your point of imagine being in the situation where you want to get into your doctor to be able to determine what is wrong with you, and yet instead of being able to do that, you're fighting for your rights to have access to that information. That the first appointment, you make the appointment, you request the interpreter, you get to the appointment, and there isn't any interpreter there. And it's then, okay, then you need to make another appointment. Perhaps the next appointment, interpreter is still not there. And then there is kind of going through perhaps organizations like ours, or the legal routes. I mean, hopefully people don't have to go the legal route. But again, it's having to fight for yourself at every turn. And individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing just want to be able to live like everybody else. They don't want to have to fight for information or for someone to provide them access to anything. Information in a business meeting, information in their medical appointment, working with their attorney. They don't want to have to be fighting for that information. They just want the information like everyone else.
It seems like as director for the Community Center for Deaf and Hard of Hearing, you're taking up that fight.
We do. We do it on an almost daily basis.
Wow.
Where we get calls. And actually, the good news is we're getting more calls from organizations that are asking those questions. They're asking questions.
Really?
Yes, that are asking questions about do I have to? Is it my legal obligation to? And even in situations where it isn't necessarily a person's legal obligation.
Could just be best practices.
Exactly. That's generally what we recommend is.
Well, that's great to know people are reaching out to you.
Yes.
Organizations.
Yes. And I think it's again an opportunity to educate. And I believe that the more we do, I think the more that our world will be accessible, but really open to individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. There's such a it's a community that is very hidden. It's very hidden. Not a lot of people know about individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. Most people have never met a person who is deaf. So it's an opportunity for people to learn.
Sure. And do you see it in other areas? I know there's a lot of deaf people who do work and who work very well, and they need that equal access to all the other parts of the job. Is that also a problem?
Yes, we have companies that will call, again asking, are they required to provide sign language interpreters for
staff meetings.
For a staff meeting, for example. But it's not only asking, it's not only just about interpreters. I think we have to be careful that it isn't just about sign language interpreters. It's also about other accommodations for individuals who may not use sign language to communicate. There are many other kinds of accommodations that people that are hard of hearing or are even deaf but do not use sign language.
Sure.
And there are other ways of providing access in a business meeting.
Maybe like visual fire alarms. I imagine that one comes up a lot.
That one comes up, but a lot is equal information that other individuals on a staff have. For example, for a conference call, let's say a person is required to attend a meeting where there's a conference call, but they're hard of hearing and they can't actually hear the telephone. Where everybody else at the table can hear, they can't. Our recommendation is that person doesn't use sign language, right, Andrew? Because they're hard of hearing and that's not their preferred method. They use English. So our recommendation is to use other kinds of accommodations. For example, CART services, which is real-time captioning.
Sure.
So that person would have access to that conference call by having a CART provider right next to them and actually typing. Transcribing basically in a visual way exactly what is going on in that conference call or a meeting or presentation.
Okay. So if we had to wrap this up and sum it up, what would be your advice to our deaf friends, our hard of hearing friends? What are the things they should always remember, the takeaways?
So the takeaway is it is your right to equal access to communication, but it's also your obligation to request those accommodations. So make the request, and if the request is that it be a live person, that you actually make a request for a live interpreter, and then keep track of who you're speaking to, when you're speaking to that person. Try as much as possible to get names of people, so that if we need to circle back to perhaps get some more information or ask some more questions, or perhaps a person to educate. So
Sure.
so again, it's it's to let individuals know what their rights are, but also what their obligations are.
Empowerment.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's what we're all about. It's all about empowering a person
Absolutely.
to take care of themselves.
And if people wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
So the best way to reach us is either via our CHSC website. Certainly they can contact me directly. They can contact me by text. They can contact me by video phone, and perhaps at the end of this conversation we could put that up on the screen.
Yeah, all of that information will be put up on the screen. Maybe it's on there right now as we're talking with our video technology.
Perfect.
And, absolutely, and you can feel free to contact me anytime. The goal of this video was, one, to be educational, and two, to empower you. We want people to know what rights they have and how to exercise them. And if you hit a roadblock, you have two great resources sitting here. The Community Center for Deaf and Hard of Hearing can help you advocate, and it will also provide so many other resources. Maybe just name a few of the other resources that you can offer.
Correct. So in addition to advocacy as well as interpreting services, we also we have an adult learning center that provides support for individuals who perhaps want to improve their literacy skills, driver's education, perhaps are looking for a GED. We have support services for individuals who are deaf of hard of hearing. Perhaps they are having difficulty with entitlement programs, or they're looking for housing. So we provide an array of services at our community center, all accessible. All of our staff are fluent in sign language, and we're a very friendly organization, and of course everybody has access 24/7 to texting and email and video phones and things like that. So.
And I'm also very excited to be part of the educational process for 2018. Our first presentation is actually with a lawyer who does a lot, along with me, who does a lot of work representing deaf people. We're also going to be talking with someone from Disability Rights Ohio in the spring, who's going to talk about what to do if you're receiving Social Security disability and you're contemplating returning to work. Essentially how to prevent an overpayment or a cessation of your benefits. And most importantly, and most tragically, we've seen in the news, there's a lot of deaf people who've had problems communicating with the police.
Correct.
We've seen loss of life and just other horrible situations, so we're actually bringing in a criminal defense attorney to speak, and hopefully some members of the police department here in Cleveland to really facilitate a better relationship between the deaf individuals and the police. And I think finally we wanted to bring someone in to talk about some estate issues, some planning to come in. So I believe the center is going to be providing year-round educational opportunities.
Yes. And it's, again, I think this partnership has been absolutely so beneficial for the community. Again, providing information in a way that's accessible to our deaf community is paramount, and we want to thank you and your legal team. Absolutely. Really, because it's been phenomenal. I think just to give the Cleveland Police a little bit of a shout out, they have been partnering with us on a special project through the Office on Violence Against Women, and I think the community needs to be aware that every Cleveland police district, so the 5 districts in the Cleveland area, have access to video remote interpreting on an emergency basis until a live interpreter can be there, which means if an officer is perhaps is at a client's or a citizen's home and they know that that citizen is deaf, they're able to bring an iPad with them and have access to an interpreter remotely again. Mm-hmm. But again, it at least they're at least able to have some effective communication until a live interpreter is.
And I heard you're responsible for that.
Well, we were lucky enough, not
Yeah.
just me. No, I have an unbelievable team.
Okay.
I happened to be on that grant project when we first were awarded the grant in 2011.
I think that's one of the first things I heard about when I joined this deaf community in 2015 was that grant.
Yeah, the grant has been instrumental, really, in helping
really
us to educate, advocate, and empower.
Sure.
And that not only goes for our deaf individuals, but it also goes for those agencies that are working with them. And I think that it's been phenomenal. It's been
Absolutely.
a wonderful opportunity.
And don't hesitate to reach out to your deaf-friendly attorneys here. Myself and Michael Liner, we consider ourselves deaf-friendly, meaning that we understand deaf culture and we will always provide effective communication. Finally, one of the most important things we're doing is to establish a network of deaf-friendly attorneys. We didn't talk about it so much today, but you might not be surprised, or maybe you are surprised to know that lawyers sometimes are the biggest offenders of not providing interpreters, which is just mind-blowing. But maybe it's not, because we're talking about education. But I don't know. I find it very troubling. But at Liner Legal, we only partner with what we call our deaf-friendly network of attorneys, which means that you will be matched up with an attorney who understands deaf culture and who understands the need to provide effective communication. So beyond just the discrimination and Social Security we talked about today, we are forming relationships in every single area of the law throughout Ohio and hopefully one day nationally to attorneys that will be deaf-friendly, will guarantee your rights will be protected, and will understand your needs and your culture. So again, thank you so much for coming by today
Thank you,
and speaking. I think this was a great video, and that's it. And you can find more information on our website, www.linerlegal.com. You can always give us a call at 216-282-1773. Thank you everyone for watching.
Thank you.
The disability warriors, fighting for those who cannot fight for themselves.